What's going on, guys? Today I'm going to cover a lot about black tank usage and a little about black tank maintenance afterwards if you are having issues. For those of you who don't know me and didn't follow me here from TikTok, my name is Nick. I'm an RV technician, and my goal here on social media as a technician is to open a line of communication between a technician and all of the newcomers to the RV industry recently. Over the past few years, there has been thousands upon thousands of new RV owners and first-time RV owners who may or may not know some of the basic principles of how to use some of the components in their RV or how to solve some of the very common issues you're going to find in an RV. I try and be quick yet thorough, and I try and get as hands-on as much as possible so that you guys can physically see what it is that I'm doing and how you can do it yourself as well. For those of you who did follow me here from TikTok, thank you for your continued support on this journey and building social media. I didn't anticipate any of this. TikTok, I only started earlier this year, and I managed to reach, at this current time, 53,000 followers, and that's awesome. So thank you guys for that continued support. And now on to the dreaded poop talk. So first and foremost, the most important thing I want to cover is going to be proper usage of the toilet. These toilets don't work the same way they work in your house. To an extent they do, but they work more like a septic system. Think of your tank as a stomach. It needs to digest the material in the tank and break it down so that it can flow out freely from the tank. Now, none of that can happen without the proper amount of water and the proper amount of digestive enzymes in the tank. I know there's a lot of tips and tricks and all kinds of things around on the internet, and a lot of answers go back and forth. I'm going to give you the answers from my perspective as a technician on how you should be using your toilet. So when you're using your toilet, when you begin using your toilet at any camping trip, or if you're full-time after you dump your tanks, what you're going to want to do is make sure you have a few gallons of water in the tank along with your digestive enzyme. Now, I have a few brands I'll mention that I personally use that I know work well, which is Unique. They work really well, and Thetford. Those two have actually worked really well, and I do have a video that I'm gonna do where I'm actually going to put solids like paper and things like that in a controlled environment and actually see how long it takes for each of those chemicals to break down. I do have that video coming up pretty soon, so stay tuned for that. So with the water in your tank and the enzyme in your tank, you now have a starter enzyme going on and a starter amount of water. So you're not just dropping solids in the tank, which are just going to stick to the bottom and cause the poop pyramid, as some of you know about. Now, the poop pyramid is one of the dreaded things about owning an RV. And that's essentially where solid waste kind of builds its way up all the way to the base of the toilet. But you can most certainly avoid said poop mountain or poop pyramid, whichever one you'd like to call it, by keeping the proper amount of water in the tank and using the proper amount of enzymes, and only using one type of enzyme. Using more than one type of soaps or detergents and things like that that you're throwing in the toilet can actually kill the enzymes and cause them not to work properly. So when you have the proper amount of water and the proper amount of enzyme in the tank to begin with, you have a good start. Now, on the note of water, on most toilets you can actually hold the pedal slightly and the water will fill in the toilet before use to make sure you have a good amount in there. Then after each flush, make sure you're allowing the water to run for a few seconds to make sure a good amount of water flushes everything down the pipes and into the tank. That's essentially your proper flushing method. Now, for number one, you can just flush it and let the water rinse it down. You don't need much more than that. It's when you're putting solid materials down the toilet that you're going to want to make sure that the proper amount of water is being used per flush. If you're trying to conserve water, unfortunately, conserving water in a toilet is going to lead to problems. If you're going to conserve water, conserve it in your shower, conserve it during your dishes, but make sure you're always using the proper amount of water here, because it will save you lots of money and headache in the future. As far as proper usage, that's really it. It doesn't get too complicated, and some people like to overcomplicate it. I've seen other videos talking about using these chemical mixtures and this chemical mixture and that. And down the road, it's actually just going to cause you more problems, because all those soaps and things you're adding to your tank is going to create a slime wall on the side of the tank, which won't allow the sensors to read, which is why a lot of you guys have issues with your sensors, because you have a slime coat built up on the sides of the tank, which are not allowing the sensors to read properly. That's also from not using the right amount of enzymes and using too many products which are killing the enzymes in your tank. Think of those enzymes like the beneficial bacteria in your stomach that your tank needs to digest that material being dumped into the tank so it can flow out freely. And now for the topic of flow. This one gets bounced around everywhere, and I get that there are some people who have been doing this for years and they haven't had any issues. That's great, you got lucky, but most people aren't in this situation where they're going to get lucky, and that is, do you keep the valve closed or open when hooked up to sewer at the campsite? And the very short and very correct answer to that is keep it closed. For those of you who came from TikTok, I do have a video on there, and I will actually do a way more in-depth video on a mock-up tank that I'm going to build. But essentially what happens when you leave the valve open is every time you flush, all the liquids and solids drop into the tank. They kind of splat at the bottom, if you will, and all the liquid's going to immediately flow out of the valve, and those solids are going to continue to stay behind and build up. That is the best way to build a poop pyramid. Pyramids can be cool, but that's not the pyramid you want to build, I promise, because getting rid of it is not always easy. You really need to focus on keeping the right amount of water in the tank, and I discussed that when I discussed proper toilet usage. And the best way to do that is to keep that valve closed. Wait till your tank gets to 3/4 full, whatever it is, or don't dump until you're done camping at least. That is the best tip I can give you about black tank care, is keep that valve closed. Do not allow it to stay open and free flow. On your gray tank, it's technically okay. Black tank, absolutely not. After you dump your tank, go ahead and flush the tank. If you don't have a tank flush installed in your tank, you can install one aftermarket. Most newer coaches have them from factory, but if you don't have one, you can dump water down the tank and do it that way. Now, one thing I recommend, this is actually something I read from one of my followers that they do. When they're done camping, when you go to dump or drain your hot water heater, he drains it into a bucket and actually dumps the hot water down the tank to help move out any materials that may be kind of sticky or stuck. And he's had great results, and I can only agree with that. I can also agree with the ice trick. I know a lot of you have heard the ice trick. Essentially, it involves dumping ice down your toilet into your black tank, and while you're driving around, it breaks everything up. Now, that does work when done correctly, and part of the video I'm going to do about the mock-up black tank, I will include a test on that I've kind of built to show you guys that it does work when used properly. But that brings me to my next point, that when you're storing your camper after you're done camping, do not fill your tank with enzyme and liquid and allow it to sit there, because what's going to happen is it's going to break up everything in the tank and break down all the solids on the sides of the tank. But then what's going to happen is while you're storing it, they're all going to settle to the bottom and start creating a layer that's very difficult to remove from the tank. If you do already have issues with your tank, poop pyramid's a little different. It gets harder to break that up. But if you just have general sensor issues, they do make products. Like, for instance, Thetford makes a tank blaster product that goes in your tank and sits overnight to help break all that stuff up. There are a few products out there like that. Now, don't forget, after you break it all up, you need to drain it. You need to flush the tank out. Do not leave that in your tank for long periods of time, because all that's going to happen is all those solids from the walls are now going to go down towards the valve and towards the bottom of the tank, and they're going to build up there and very likely settle there. So even after you drain the tank, you're going to find issues with all that stuff that is settled and caked along the bottom of the tank and along the bottom of the valve. I have tons of content there, and essentially I'm going to be taking a lot of the content I've made there that's done really well and getting a lot more in depth with it here on YouTube, so that I can explain things more in depth, and you as the end user can understand it better and possibly make some of these repairs yourself. Now, the last thing I really want to cover is smell. When people have excessive smells, there definitely is a problem. It's not something that's wrong with your tank. Your tank is always going to smell, if that makes sense. Even with the odorizer, it's going to smell. We all know what's going in there. There's not much that can cover that smell. So if you do have excessive amounts of smell, it could really only be a couple of things. The seal at the base of your toilet, sealing it to the flange, if that were to be bad, that's where some of the fumes would be coming from, as well as the seal on the inside of the toilet here. If your toilet won't hold water, that seal's likely bad. But those are really the two places that smell can come from, unless it were from the actual vent stack from the tank, which goes up through walls and out to the roof. And these do not help it. Now, these little fans that we call fart fans, they don't pull too much air and they don't cause too many problems. So there's not much you need to do as far as opening windows or anything. But when you do have something like a fantastic fan, these draw massive amounts of air out of the coach, and without a door or a window open, they will actually create a vacuum in the coach. Now, a vacuum in the coach is not a good thing, and it can cause a lot of problems with more than just your toilet. But essentially what's happening in that situation is it's actually looking for somewhere to draw that vacuum or alleviate that vacuum. So it's going to find places to pull through, and one of those places may be the seal at the bottom of your toilet, pulling air from your tank. So you're essentially just sucking air from your tank into your coach. So when using a fantastic fan, always have a window crack somewhere. And I'll cover that in depth because there's a lot more things that can actually harm than just bringing smells from your tank. So these are some of the most basic steps. Your just basic care, your basic maintenance, and basic usage. I will have individual videos covering different things like the mock-up black tank. The original video I recorded for my first video, kind of included all of that stuff, some mock-up stuff I did, and the video got so in depth and I lost track, and I actually got to a point where the video was about 40 minutes long. And in the midst of recording and doing other things, I was posting on TikTok, and I got some feedback from some of my followers, and I'd like to keep some of my videos sub 10 minutes, sub 15 minutes, and not go crazy with them, so that I can keep your guys' attention and make these as simple as possible. I do plan on getting a lot more in-depth on YouTube and being a little more thorough with things on YouTube like this video, since I do have a lot more time to record on YouTube. If you guys have any specific content you'd like to see, leave it in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe. I will have a lot more content coming here soon. If you're not already following me on TikTok and you're on TikTok, it's the same name, that RV Tech.